And we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Indivisible.
Thank you, Representative Farnan. You want to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to handle the noise ordinance out of order because my wife is away and I have a 6- and 8-year-old on computers and I don't know how long they will stay in their cute stage. Ella and Chad. Yes.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all in favor? Signify. Aye. Okay, any opposed, any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
You'll abstain. All right, one abstention. Motion carries. So we will start with the amendment to the noise ordinance.
Jill, you want to join me up here?
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Good evening, colleagues. I think we got it. Okay, it's on now. Perfect. So this has kind of been a long journey with the noise ordinance. I must say, with the help of Jill Vergaro and the other co-sponsors, I think we've got a consensus on the language that is crystal clear. In a nutshell, all we're trying to do here is have the earlier start date for noise to be on a Friday morning as opposed to Sunday morning. I think it's intuitive that if you're a contractor or if you're a homeowner who likes silence, you're going to want that on Sunday morning, that extra hour. And Friday, if you're a contractor, you likely would probably want to be able to get in work at that earlier time. So we're just basically flip-flopping those two dates, and through the work of my colleague here, I think we made it crystal clear with the breakdown in the schedule. So if you have any questions, we will entertain them. I didn't really mean that. Well, go ahead.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. This might just be my lack of familiarity with ordinances, but nowhere in the ordinance does it state what the fine is if people break the ordinance. So I was just...
There actually is a fine designated in the ordinance. It's not something that we changed at all, so it's not included in our revisions. But in Chapter 78...
like 78. It's a different subsection of the stat.
Oh, right, because it's not listed here.
78-7, so the penalties, it's $50 for the first offense and $90 for each additional offense.
Okay, my son got a $1,026 noise fine at college, so I was just wondering what the cost was. And you guys are happy with $50?
I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah, I think at this point we're going to not let perfect be the enemy of the good, and I think just often sometimes the hassle of just having to pay the ticket is sufficient.
And 1,000 was excessive, but, you know.
Yeah. Or maybe he got 100 of them, but it is...
Sadly not. Thank you.
Representative Way.
Thank you. Carol Way, RTM District 5. In looking at the list of offenders, I was amazed that there are some of the same ones where we had, when I was on ZBA, and that was before I ever came on to the RTM, and I've been on for 8 years now with the RTM, some of the exact same owners. And I'm just wondering, when you talk about the fine, whether or not, and I think there was even assault in one of the, problems.
I think that was for the disturbance of the peace, and I actually don't know how the two ordinances interrelate. So I'm not sure how to speak to that issue, but I think that the list that we got was the disturbance of the peace statute.
Well, I was just going by what was in our packet, and,
It's a separate issue.
oh,
Yeah, I think those are separate offenses.
And then Chief McNamara is
sorry,
disturbing.
it was a separate issue. Sorry about that, but
Sorry.
it's probably noise ordinances also with those same people.
There was one listed for noise, and I
so
wasn't
the
sure how they
motion
interrelate,
is-
but
Because they
Is
were
this. Does that
also
cover
people
what you wanna
who
do?
definitely had more than just 4 occupants in a rental. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I mixed them up.
We fully accept your apology, Carol. Anyone else?
Representative Ambrose.
Yes, I've got a question. With respect to the amendment, should it not say somewhere in it that this amends the existing ordinance, leaving the remaining or the balance of the ordinance in full force and effect? Because there are other sections that Jill pointed out, including the penalties for the fines that aren't in this amendment. So there should be some language that essentially says remaining, or allowing the remaining
I don't believe
portions
that
of the
I don't believe
ordinance
that
in
would
full
be
force and effect.
actually in the ordinance, but from a procedural standpoint, I believe we could make that clear at the meeting and I think that would be sufficient. But this is also my first ordinance change, but intuitively, and as a lawyer, I think that would do it.
I agree with Brian, and also in just reviewing the municipal ordinances in all of in 60 different towns, a lot of them have revised kind of recently, and none of them use that language that you're recommending to ensure that people knew that nothing else in the ordinance was changing.
Okay, I don't think it would require postponing or putting the matter over. I think a simple amendment, just assuring people that the balance of the existing ordinance shall remain in effect. So
I think we could do that through the legislative history, through the meeting as we present it, to make it clear, and I think that would be sufficient, but we could double check on that from a historical standpoint.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. What about a red line version? Would that solve everybody's issue? Just
I thought there was a red line version.
there may be, but I'm saying,
Oh.
would that, a red line version, if that's what we accept, wouldn't that take care of your issue, Mr. Ambrose?
I would, I think.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
But I think that would require us to include 78.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that I'm concerned that's what his concern is.
And I'm sorry, but my concern strictly is that these are amendments to the existing ordinance. I think somewhere in this amendment, one should just spell out that the remainder of the existing ordinance shall remain in full force and effect.
We could use shall amend and replace the following sections of the existing ordinance only. So
That's fine, also, that does it too.
We could maybe, even as we present that, so it wouldn't be actually changing that, but it would make it clear to,
That's fine.
Representative Wackerman.
I don't know if we could also do it in terms of the motion that we all pass. It could be in the body of the motion, not to get too in the weeds, but another
makes sense.
suggestion.
Yep.
Representative Georgiadis.
It's Georgiadis, for the record. So back to since we are going to all the effort to change the ordinance, back to the fine, a parking violation is $70. Do you really believe that $50 is a deterrent? Because obviously you have an ordinance, but the main objective is to deter people, contractors, college students, whoever, from violating the ordinance. And I really doubt that $50 is much of a deterrent to some of these contractors that, start sawing stone at 6:30 on a Saturday morning. Is it possible to make an amendment and change the fee if we all concur tonight and tack it on to the ordinance? Or is that too much work?
I would be fine with that, but if the noise is recurrent, so if someone continues to hear the noise, it's considered a recurring offense. So each of those times, they're going to be fined $100. So I don't know, I think that adds up to a lot. But I would be amenable to changing the fine if that's something everybody wanted to do.
Well, if the noise is a contractor, they basically put the patio in one time on a Saturday morning. They're not going to put in a second patio. Obviously, it's different for college students, but with contractors, they want to get it done. And I just don't think $50 is a deterrent. So, I mean, there are various reasons why people have noise, but I don't know.
I do believe it is somewhat low, so I agree with you. I also do think there is something to be said about the fact that it's not like, I mean, how do we typically pay our bills right now, right? We do it through automated banking, we do it through our banking account where we just wire, so I gotta go get a check out, I gotta go mail it to the town, so if I forget to do it within a certain amount of time, then now I have an outstanding, so I think there is that additional hassle of just getting a fine or ticket through, the police as is. So I do think that does make people less, obviously I think there is some kind of, deterrent by that alone, in addition to the monetary amount. But I would also be open to increasing the amount to $100, because I'm sure it hasn't changed in many years.
Yeah, if I would like to make an amendment to increase the fee, and you guys have done the research, so you can decide not only what is the deterrent, but, what does the town, what is actually the cost of going down, sending the police, we want to zero out at the very least. Chief McCarthy, do you have any idea when you're called to a noise complaint? Chief McCarthy. Gary McNamara, Chief McNamara, do you have any idea what kind of cost to the town? Oh, through the moderator. Oh, sorry.
Please, Chief.
So I think
We'll make room for you, Chief.
Step aside. So I think the chief is coming. Sorry, I was trying to look something up as you were saying it. So I think, and I don't have a direct answer for you, but I think you want to be concerned when we go to a noise complaint, depending upon the charge. Now, there's different charges, so we can give an infraction for a noise complaint creating a public disturbance, or we can do a violation of a town ordinance. And I believe that a town ordinance violation is guided by state statute. So if we respond and we're going to give you a fine for a town ordinance, we look at what that town ordinance fine would be, and I don't think we can issue a town ordinance infraction that is $1,000. I think it's more guided by the state. So our infraction book for a town ordinance is going to be a certain violation, and I think it's dictated by the state.
Through Mr. Moderator to Chief, do you know how much it costs to send the police cars down there and actually, Yeah,
it depends on the amount of time spent. I know that we're going to talk about the Ordinance 61 after this, so we kind of take the time versus their pay rate per hour, so it just would depend upon how much time they spent there. And I don't have that broken down for you at this moment.
Thank you.
Representative Way.
Carol Way, District 5. Actually, I think that the group that has worked on this, they've spent months on this, and many revisions have been made, and the primary reason for the change was to change the hours. I think that what Drew is bringing up is a good thing, but I think that we need to get this passed, and then if you want to go back and do other revisions, then you can have all of the background information. But I think to try and put all of that into this when it's taken so much time to just bring this to the floor, it will just, I think, slow things down again.
Representative Pierce.
Just getting back to Peter's issue, So I think the way to address it is by the resolution that we adopt on the floor. The resolution on the call references amendments to 78-2, which was the original section of the ordinance that you guys were amending. You guys subsequently added another section, so that should be added to the call. The resolution on the call doesn't include the entirety of the amendments, but Peter, I think that addresses your issue, because it's only amending those sections as set forth in the resolution. And then, Drew, the maximum fine that we can set, I think by town ordinance, is $250, and that is set by statute.
And also, Drew, if you'd like me, I could research a little bit more some of the comparative data from the other municipalities, because I did start taking a list when I was doing this information for the hours. I did look at fines a little bit, and we seemed within the normal range, but I can do a more condensed list and give people an idea of what it is.
I think a 169-town survey would be useful to me, so we could do that a little early
In a
November. Early November, on the weekend.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on to item number 4, which is to hear and consider and act upon the following appointments to the Fair TV Commission. Todd J. Chandler, Republican, 65 Hilltop Drive. Is Mr. Chandler here? Could you come up, please, and address the representatives?
Excuse me. Good evening, Todd Chandler. I'm not sure what the addressing part is here.
Tell us why you want to do this.
Sure. So I've been in the digital media business myself for over 20 years. Disney, Time Inc., and a couple other brands I've worked with. Would love to get a little bit more involved locally. I was on the Parking Commission for a while. I'm working more locally now in Connecticut, so didn't make quite as much sense to be involved on the commuter side, but I think there's a lot of potential with Fair TV, and it's a way I can give back to the community.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? No, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones, are you here? Okay, Andrew Jones, Democrat, 1046 Oldfield Road.
Good evening. I would just sort of, I spent 35 years in television. I was a producer at various networks, moving my way up the chain until I eventually became a boss and ran shows. I'm very eager, my grandparents lived here, my mother went to school here, I raised my children here, and I'm eager to serve and give back. And that's where I'm coming from with this.
Good, great. Does anybody have any questions? And seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to item number 5. Here consider and act upon the following appointment to the Holland Hill School Building Committee as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Berkeley K. Murray, unaffiliated, 47 Renchy Street. And this is to fill a vacancy created by the resignation of Nicholas Assay. Good evening.
Hi, Berkeley Murray. I have been with Holland Hill for the past 6 years. Previously, 2 years as PTA president, 1 year as treasurer before that. Actively involved in the community, obviously. I do have 1 more year at Holland Hill with my 5th grader now. And in fact, started the process of this renovation as my first year as PTA president, so I feel like I've kind of rode this along the whole way. And this just seemed like the natural progression since I'm no longer in the PTA. I'm currently serving as past president. I'm also a homeowner in the neighborhood, so I have an investment in making this building work.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next item is number 3. Well, it's to receive a report from the first selectman. or his designee, which would be Chief McNamara, on disorderly conduct. Good evening, Chief.
Hello, everyone. So I believe you have in front of you the report, but just kind of to give an overview for you, we have been utilizing Town Ordinance 61 as a tool, specifically some of our problem areas. And what you have in front of you is a list of those individuals or companies that we are currently in process with. So this report is just to generate information for all of you to show you that Town Ordinance 61 is alive and well, and we are actively using it as a tool within the police department.
All right, any questions for the chief? Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. The shaded items, is that, can we talk about what, this is the hookah lounge, is that right?
It is an LLC that is responsible for the property where the hookah lounge is.
Could you give us a few words about the status of that, or we've had a lot of complaints from the neighbors there? Is there anything you can do besides just issue infractions? How does that work?
Well, we obviously have had a lot of concerns over specific noise and other issues that arise from this specific location, and we have to take a guarded approach in that this is a business in town. However, there had been significant amounts of calls for service there. So we react to calls for service, and when we start to see a pattern, in other words, when we start to see calls for service that are continuing to demand resources of the organization, specifically in a location like this at specific times of the day, mainly in the evening, we start to take a look at it and see if there's a different approach we can take. Maybe there's explanations and discussions we can have with business owners to try and avoid some of the complaints. So we've done that, and we continue to do that in a variety of different locations in town. And this is, this ordinance, as you can see in the shaded area, are billed hours of police response and follow-up that may have actually occurred. So specifically with the ordinance, and then I'll get more into your specifics on that location. So the ordinance allows the police department or the town, if we respond to a problem, to identify that problem. If it's a domestic disorderly conduct creating a public disturbance or a breach of peace kind of situation, we can notify the homeowner or the resident or the LLC via letter that you are kind of put on notice. And then after that, if we respond back to that location and we issue an infraction or arrest an individual at that location for one of those charges, then the process kicks in. And if those individuals are found guilty, which is a specific part of the ordinance, they have to be found guilty of the second charge that we charge them with, then we can bill them for the police response. So those variety of different numbers and charges represent an estimate of the 35 minutes, depending upon the amount of time the officer spent there, and then processing by our court officer that might have included in there. So that's the variety of different amounts that are outstanding at that LLC or at that location.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
So are you saying that the LLC is charged that amount?
They are, yes.
But on the initial call, it might be a customer of the LLC who is the one who might be arrested or given a fine or talked to or whatever it might be?
So two different things. One, if you have a location in town, and you'll see some of the other ones that we have deal primarily with some of our problems down on Fairfield Beach Road, kind of those ongoing responses to different locations. But if you have a location in town, there's some responsibility that you have to make sure that there is order being conducted there. So if we respond there, we don't have to necessarily arrest the business owner. We can arrest somebody at the business, and that's kind of what this represents. We haven't necessarily arrested the business owner for all of these. These are customers or customers leaving or a variety of different things that have brought us there, and we have activity that is in violation of the law that occurs. So as a result of that violation of law, we put the owner of the establishment on notice that they are responsible for, or potentially responsible for, future costs of police services to that location.
Thank you, Chief. And I think you also, in a situation where there's a lot of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think there's also I would imagine that you send cruisers past there and things like that to try to discourage such activities and sort of make a presence. Is that something else that you would do, something like that?
Yeah, we've, beyond this, we spent a lot of resources and time and energy at this location and the surrounding area to try and avoid problems before they occur. But obviously, as you can see, we weren't necessarily that successful. But there's a variety of different tools we use when we start talking about a location like this, yes.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions? Representative Pine.
Chief, I was wondering, there's a state statute, nuisance abatement. Would that be applicable in this, where you can actually seize the property if they have so many violations? And
I mean, yeah, it may be applicable. I'm not prepared at this particular moment to go into whether or not it's applicable in this location. I think right now that location has not been open for quite some time, so I believe that that problem in this specific location will resolve itself.
okay, because I see the narcotic violations, I take it those are felonies. You have at least 2.
Yeah, it may be a felony or may just be a possession charge. So, you know, to seize property is significant, and the steps involved with seizing property as a result of some of these violations is quite a significant step. I think this step, as well as some of the other steps we've taken, have resulted in this specific location and the problems surrounding it having been resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Tallman.
Hello, Chief. How are you?
Very well.
Off the top of your head, between the disorderly conducts and the noise ordinances, how many do you think are related to college kids? I know a bunch of these are down the beach, and this has been going on since Fairfield U was built. Who knows when?
Yeah, so if you look at the top of that sheet, is it referring to the report today?
Just in general, really, but I know there's always disturbances down the beach, whether it's the
Correct.
sea grape or the college kids or the whoever.
So when you look at the beach area and some of the challenges that every year the police department is presented with, meaning that every year there's a new group of seniors that come down to the beach, so it's not that we're dealing with people that are used to things down at the beach and the enforcement package and the pattern in which we try to do things. So every year is a new year for students down the beach, but it's an old year for residents down the beach. They experience in and year out. So when we look at the problems presented specifically down on the Fairfield Beach area, which I've been here almost 30 years, and it's been 30 years of addressing the uniqueness of the relationship between the full-time residents and the students. And by the way, 30 years, I think we've seen some improvements, although if you're woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning this weekend, you're going to say the chief doesn't know what he's talking about, and I understand that. But I think overall, we've seen some significant improvements. So we use a variety of different methods to kind of address that unique problem, and those problems are unique. We do take enforcement action, and at the same time we meet with residents, we meet with the university, specifically Fairfield University. We meet with them regularly. They do provide and pay for an officer on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night to ride down in that area, specifically to address some of those issues, specifically to prevent those issues from occurring. And we meet with all the students before they live down there. We try to send the message down there that this kind of stuff won't be tolerated. And then we take enforcement action as it's warranted, understanding that there are a lot of violations in an officer if he were to address one specific incident. So if I have an officer down there on a Friday night and he sees somebody carrying a glass of alcohol, which is a violation, if that officer deals with that individual alone, then that officer is tied up from the broader sense of having issues down the beach, meaning noise and crowds and whatnot, a variety of different things. The way in which we use this town ordinance, and we've just began to use this town ordinance to address some of those issues, is really focused on the landlords. Meaning that oftentimes landlords, and some of them live out of state, so they're not even aware of some of the ongoing problems. We utilize this ordinance to send that letter to the landlord. So if we arrest the student for creating a public disturbance, having a party on the beach at a property, then they're off to court, they're addressed at court, they're addressed at school, and we get reports from the school as to whether or not action was taken, so that we understand that the school is holding the students accountable. And then at the same time, we send a letter to the landlords. And that letter puts them on notice, such as they did for this business, the hookah lounge, that any future violations may in fact result in you being charged for police service. As you can see from that list, we have not had any repeat offenders. So the effectiveness of this letter to landlords and the ordinance to landlords has been very, very effective, to the point where some landlords have traveled out of state to meet with the students to really get a grasp of what's occurring. So this is really a useful tool to get the landlords on board to become part of the solution rather than not really even understand the problems.
Great, thank you.
Representative McCarthy.
Chief, insofar as calculating these costs, is that I'm assuming it was done based on the amount of resource devoted to these instances times an hourly rate of personnel. Is that a valid assumption?
It is.
Okay.
So, you know, if you look down towards the green highlighted section of the report, that's why you get the $100 and some odd cost. It's whether an officer was there writing a ticket for maybe 35 minutes, or we estimate it to be 35 minutes, and then we take an estimate of what the court officer's fee would be to kind of process that paperwork. So they're relatively small amounts. I mean, I calculated out it's about $1,900 right now that is lying in wait for the LLC, but that's really a rough estimate of what we do for cost.
Right, and often you would look at fixed costs versus variable costs. So the question I'm getting to is, in any case here, were costs occurred over and above what you were budgeted for, or would these costs represent an increase in the budget, or is that within your budget? It's just a question of calculation on resource versus resource and time.
So when we do our budget, you know, you pay for police to be there.
Right.
And if they're not handling calls for service in the hookah lounge or at Fairfield Beach Road, they're handling calls for service in a variety of different locations. So
Right.
that's just built-in budget time.
Okay.
I think the purpose of this ordinance is to say, if you have a location in town that is creating a problem, fix the problem. And if you don't fix the problem, then we're going to start charging you over and above what you pay, because you're tapping those resources.
Right. I was just concerned that no element of this is a variable cost, which the taxpayers would have to it would hit them a little bit harder over and above what's already budgeted for. So, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I can't say that there are not times that we have to devote resources above and beyond what we normally would have on the road for some of the situations here. There are times when, you know, the circumstances down at the beach require us to put extra resources into that, and that may be above and beyond the salary. It could be an overtime issue. And likewise, some of the issues here with this LLC might require us to go above and beyond that, but generally most of this is all just fixed cost for having a police officer on duty.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 3. I just want to clarify, if you don't mind. So I just did a quick run-up at about $2,500 for the fines that I'm seeing in the green column that you're billing. So you're asking us to bill these, that you want to be able to bill them, or you've billed them already?
So I'm glad I said at the beginning it was a rough estimate of $1,900.
Okay.
But I'll take your word for $2,500. So all I'm doing tonight
Okay.
is really just in the town ordinance, it says that the first selectman or a designee will kind of give you a report on that. The billing is already in process. We've already done the billing. Now it's just a question of whether or not we can get the individual to pay for it. So I'm not asking you to do anything other than just to be aware of it.
How successful have you been in the past with billing and collections? I would imagine the police department's sending a bill that is being paid, but I'm making assumptions I shouldn't.
Yeah, we, currently all in green are outstanding. We have not gotten any money from this ordinance or from the process and the work that we put into that. So that all remains out there.
Okay.
The next step is to now, we've began discussions with the town attorney to figure out what the next steps are to bill. Keeping in mind that, as I said in the beginning when I first started, this is a tool that we use. Ideally, we want to solve problems. And so it's not as black and white as you might think it is. This is a tool. We have outstanding bills, but at the end of the day, the neighborhood that is complaining about the problem wants the problem to end. I believe that the problem has ended. I believe that. And now we're, kind of saying what our next steps are with regards to these outstanding bills. But again, sometimes it's a carrot and a stick.
Right.
And that sometimes people need an extra push to address problems, and this is kind of the direction that we headed, one of the directions we headed in with that ongoing problem.
So the top part that is not in the green, they have not been received bills, or they?
Not been billed.
Because it's not repeat offending, there's been no extra cost other than the initial?
Correct. So the statute says if we respond down to a location, and these specific ones are mainly on Fairfield Beach Road. So we respond down there on a Friday, Saturday night. We arrest a student for creating a public disturbance or what have you. We send a letter to the owner of the location, so the landlord, indicating that we made an arrest there, and we detail verbiage from the statute and saying that any further arrests and convictions may result in a bill that you have to pay.
And the homeowner doesn't want this nonsense?
The landlord, up till this point, has not allowed another issue down at any of these locations.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
McCullough. Thank you.
Representative McCullough, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Hank. Chief McCarthy, regarding Town Ordinance 61-1 and your report, thank you very much for this, by the way. 29 reports in the fiscal year 17, 19 of 29 of which were from the same landlord. Is the ordinance working to your department's benefit, or is there something in the ordinance that this body must address?
So, no, I think it's working. I think I wouldn't focus on the green, I'd focus on the top portion. Because there are some locations, and, it's just through nature of existing, that create bigger problems than we can handle initially. And what I mean by that is some long-term locations are problems. We don't have a lot of long-term establishments in the town of Fairfield that create problems for neighborhoods. But I think if you look at the success we've had up top, with really people that are renting houses, and the renters are creating a lot of the problems, we've had success in notifying them, and the problems have been resolved. So I think that it is working effectively for our needs at this particular moment. And I think, obviously you look at that outstanding bill, whether it's $1,900 or $2,500, yeah, would we want to collect that? Sure, we want to collect it to continue to send that message. But that's more of a process of courts and getting someone to pay than this statute this town ordinance would allow for.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that
Yep.
the ordinance was working to your benefit. And I do see, based on the dates and when students arrive, that the number of calls in the fall versus the ones in the spring, you obviously made a dent in the the student behavior in the fall so that it didn't repeat in the spring. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's not me, it's all the men and women out there every night.
Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. All the ones that are not in green, that don't have a cost affixed to them, there's no penalty when you have a disorderly conduct? They don't get fined?
So this is really dealing with the owner of the property.
Okay.
So we respond and take action. So a lot of these have resulted in arrests of the people causing the disturbance, but the town ordinance now allows us to notify the landlord that that's a problem. We can't bill them for the first offense. We have to properly notify them that you have a problem at your location and you have to address it because ongoing problems will likely get a bill. So these have been...
These are just the landlords?
Yeah, exactly.
Not the offenders?
The students, in all likelihood, I don't have the reports in front of me, but in all likelihood, all of these locations have resulted in an arrest of one or more students at these locations that triggered the letter to the landlords.
Thank you.
Representative Dean.
I redid the numbers. It is a little bit over 1,900. I had added one twice.
Nice. Thank you for
Just wanted to clarify.
saving me in front of this body that I have to go before budget numbers with. So you thought that that was nothing, but I was having a heart attack.
Just wanted to make you feel better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I added number twice.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Before we move on to item number 5, housekeeping, Mr. Chandler and Mr. Jones, I believe you're still here, and I apologize, but if you would like, you may leave. The committees will not vote on this until next week. You are, well, you, please stay, but you're not required to come back next week unless you want to, because you did appear here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item is item number, well, it's agenda item 7, but it's our item 5. It's to hear and consider and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen, and it has to do with youth services. And Mr. Calabrese, are you going to present this? Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Anthony Calabrese, Parks and Recreation. So the Youth Services Grant is made available by the State Department of Education. Fairfield has applied for and been awarded this grant for the past 25 years. It's a 2-year grant in the amount of $25,188 per year. Fairfield's required to do a local match in that amount already contained in the 2017-18 budget, and will be in the 2018-19 budget. It's in our personnel. We just build it right into one of our only program coordinator. So I'll take any questions that you guys have.
Any questions? Tom, you have a question? Representative McCarthy?
I always ask this question, how comfortable are we with state funding at this point in time?
Oh, I have zero confidence. As of 4:30 today, you know, we checked the state site. It has not been awarded. Their history is very good of giving it to us. However, I think we all know, you know, the situation the state's in right now, and there's no budget. If for whatever reason that we didn't get these funds, I would do my best to absorb this within our programming fees. You know, again, $25,000 a year. It is a chunk of change, but I should be able to find it if we don't get it.
Thanks, you gave me goosebumps.
Representative Ambrose?
Yes. How many youth are involved in this program? And can you just in a few minutes explain how productive this program is and what it's done to benefit the children?
Well, I can do my best to, based on the sheet that my staff gave me. So, what this grant is actually used for, we use $16,000 of it for administrative and direct service salaries, which is $15,000 for clerical support and $600 for our beanery staff, which is like our teen activity group that meets a couple times a year. We use $4,600 that's given to Fairfield Community Services, which is our subcontractor for youth and family counseling. And we also use $272 for the Connecticut Youth Services Association annual membership, which brings us to $4,900. And then we use another $4,200, which is directly to your point here, for the Town Youth Council programs, which currently there's 65 high school students from Ludlow Ward and Prep. It goes towards the supplies, snacks, pizza parties, their gifts at the end of the year. They get typically either a blanket or a sweatshirt, depending on the year. Transportation, bus transportation for their activities, team building activities. And then towards their special events that they do. So they have a foul shooting contest during the Thanksgiving week, which benefits a food drive. They provide the glow necklaces for the tree lighting down at Town Hall. And then the holiday breakfast and our egg hunt. So that it does go to some of that programming too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative White.
I think I noticed a figure in there for Fairfield Counseling Services also. So I am assuming that you do detect at times certain situations with teens?
Yep.
And so it's used for that?
Yes, it is.
I also noticed there seemed to be a run on Olivia, Amanda, and Lily names. Excuse me. In the listing of teens.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Calabrese.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next item is the firefighters' contract, which will be presented by Mr. Hibson.
Good evening. Thank you.
Welcome.
Emmett Hibson, Human Resources. Does anyone need a copy of the employee by any chance? Okay. So before you have the contracts for a successor, the MOU for a successor contract for the firefighter union, IAFF. Just want to run down the key parts of the agreement. We believe that the contract is beneficial to the town and that the town was able to obtain savings in pension and health care, kept the wages low, and made changes to the contract language that limits overtime and caps exposure. Running through that, wages, as you notice, it's a 4-year contract starting July 1, 17. Has an average increase of 1.5%. That includes a 0% in July 1, 17, and then 2% per year on all the July 1s, July 1, 18, July 1, 19, July 1, 20. It does add a 25-year longevity step for the mechanic and the master mechanic. Pension, it includes a 0.25% increase per year starting July 1, 18. So in the year they're giving 0, there's obviously no increase, but in years 2, 3, and 4 of the contract, the members will be contributing an additional 0.25% per year toward their pension. And then for new hires, there were 2 provisions. One was to eliminate the 30-year and out, and the other was to increase the retirement age from 51 to 56 years old. Healthcare, did a couple changes there. One, we increased the healthcare contribution by 1% per year. Currently, it's at 13%, going to 14, 15, 16, and 17 on July 1s. Additionally, we had provision where new employees will not be allowed to smoke, and that we will be requiring health screenings based on age and gender for early detection and prevention. And then finally, some language changes. We have the chief does have the authority now to, or will have the authority if approved, to alter the fire marshal's hours so that if attending class, the hours that they are assigned can coincide with the class. So as long as the class is less than 40 hours in a week, there will not be an overtime assignment. Sorry, sir. Limit spending education spending to $30,000. Currently, we pay for classes and there is no cap on expenditures. This was an issue for the chief. He had noticed that with the way classes can be now done online and done quickly, that it could ramp up the cost to the town. So that was an issue that we brought up at the table.
reduced overtime minimum from 4 hours to 3 hours, eliminated a meal allowance for employees that are either held over or called back. There was a restriction in the town using money in the OPEB mandatory fund, so we are now eligible to use that money to fund retiree benefits. So that's the main portions, actually, that is the contract, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hibson? Mr. Pine, Representative Pine.
What is the contribution? You add a 0.25%, so what is the total contribution?
Right now, it's at 4.75, so at the end of the contract, it'll be 5.5%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tallman.
Hi, Peter Tallman, District 8.
Sir.
Can you explain number 13, the overtime? Currently 4 hours minimum should be reduced to 3 hours minimum.
Sure, a lot of our overtime provisions, most of our overtime provisions have a 4-hour mandatory requirement. So regardless of the number of hours actually worked, they have a 4-hour payment. So we have that, we ask that be reduced and negotiated down to 3 hours worked. So 3 hours, so if they work for 2 hours, they get paid for 3, whereas before they were getting paid for 4. If they work for 4 hours or more, or 3 hours or more, it's irrelevant, they get whatever the hours they work.
Can we get that down to 2? I mean, if they're not working.
Next contract, we can try for that.
Oh,
I'm sorry, you still do.
no, I forgot her name. All right, I'm sorry, I've drawn a blank on your name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Representative Gale.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at, sorry, Representative Gale, District 6. Nice to meet you. I'm just looking at these tests that are being added, particularly I see the PSA for males, and I see, is this a requirement for females to receive a mammogram over the age of 40?
That's what we negotiated. That would be a requirement, yes.
But I believe, even in the face of recent changes in recommendations?
Well, firefighter, I don't know if you're aware, but firefighters have been pushing for coverage for cancer to be considered an on-the-job, an occupational hazard.
Oh, due to the radios and...
Yeah, so what the purpose of this is to determine whether there's any cancer. So most of these are cancer-based, and this is something that, again, the IAFF has been trying to push that the state put in there. There used to be a heart and hypertension clause. You know, they're trying to get a cancer provision in there, and so if they're going to do that, the feeling is that if there's going to be prevention and screening, we should know it up as early as possible, because they say early detection and prevention is the best way to deal with it.
So, I'm sorry, but an employee doesn't have the right to opt out of it?
Right now,
That seems to be contrary to consent. Sorry.
Any other questions? Bill Gerber.
Hi, Bill Gerber, District 2. Could you, number 14, you may have explained it.
So right now,
wasn't sure I
so
understood.
OPEB, right, we have employees contributing, fire and police especially contributing into the OPEB fund. And to get the plan funded, or the trust funded, there was, at the onset, a provision or in the MOU that created it, a provision that prevented us from spending money out of the mandatory. So there is a mandatory and then just a general portion of the trust. And the mandatory and the portion that's funded in the mandatory, which is all the employees and a portion of the employers pursuant to that MOA, was not eligible for the town to use to expend on retiree health. So now that there's enough, there's money in there, that was, Bob, CFO had asked that we get that language removed. That was an issue for the CFO, and so that was a provision that we had sought.
Certainly.
One more question. Regarding retirement, I think I'm behind the times on this, but what is the current formula for calculating retirees' pension benefits?
So there's two formulas, one for employees hired, I believe, prior to 2011, and one after 2011. There's a cap of 80% for those hired prior to 2011 and 75% for those after. I believe it's 2% for the first 10 years, 2.5% for years 10 through 20, and maybe 3% for through age 32, something along, is that? Actually, I don't have the contract in front of me, but 25 to 30.
Okay, thanks. And there have been times where people have sort of, been promoted in the last few months of their.
That was a 12-year, or 12-month time they have to be in the position, unless there is, the one exception to that is if they unfortunately die during the time that they get promoted, then they'll have assumed to have amended 12 months. But someone who doesn't serve in the position for 12 months will not get credit for the time in that grade.
And how about overtime?
Overtime is not part of the pension.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Representative Pine.
Just to follow up on Representative Gale's question, it has mammograms for females at age 40. Do you know how many firefighter females we have at age 40?
I do not know.
We have one.
One? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
One quick one.
Oh, thanks. Representative Durrell.
Yep, Alex Durrell, RTM 3. Will there be any union contracts on the table next month?
Yes. The ECC bargaining unit.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was trying to get that for this month. Unfortunately, time ran out on me in getting the documents over with the information you needed. It was a short lead time, so.
Representative Way.
I'll be very fast, but the new section going back to, I'm all for preventive health care, and I'm assuming that that's what this new section is about. However, in the past, with, I believe, both fire and police, there has been some abuse of early disability in Connecticut, where we had a law where they could, it was heart and stress, and this requires a cardiac stress test. And I remember we had many that were supposedly qualifying very early on and taking early disability.
I think you're thinking of the H&H statute, and that's for employees hired after 1996. I'm not sure the exact date in 96, but that statute's no longer applicable. So you'd have to be hired prior to 96. So an employee can still claim, heart disease or hypertension, but the burden's on them to prove that it's now part of the occupation. It used to be that there was a presumption that if they had it and they had a screen coming onto the position, that the job caused the heart hypertension disease.
You're saying that about 1996 tells me that, that's probably the answer that I needed, because I remember this in the early 90s.
Yeah, it was a very costly provision.
It was very costly, so no longer applies.
It does not apply.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Hibson.
Thank you.
Moving on, we'll hear from Chief McCarthy about the firefighter FEMA equipment grant. Welcome, Chief McCarthy, and Assistant Chief Gamola.
Good evening, Dennis McCarthy, Fire Chief, and with me Assistant Chief George Gamola. What you have before you is for approval of a grant the Chief Gamola applied on behalf of the department to the Federal Emergency Management Agency for $110,000 with the 10% match required by the town. That match was secured in our 2017 training budget, so there will be no 2018 expenses. The purpose of the grant is to make health and wellness a priority in the department. We have an ongoing program, and we're able to expand that program under this grant to reduce the number of injuries and sickness and improve overall health of our members. A very good example of why this is so important is the incidents that we responded to this past Saturday. If you watch Cablevision News, you know that Fairfield, along with a number of departments, responded to the town of Westport and fought a very stubborn house fire on a very hot day. Very taxing. Chief Gamola was part of the crew that responded there. Immediately after that, the crews came back, and as you know, they work 24-hour shift. Same crew that responded to that fire, unfortunately, were dispatched to respond to a drowning on Perry's Mill Pond. Those firefighters, having been exhausted at the fire, are pressed into service to make heroic efforts to try to save a life. And for those of us who go to the gym, what we do at the gym is not preparing us for the strains that are placed on our firefighters responding to those type of calls. Also in this grant is an opportunity to focus on peer support for our members for mental health. And as you can imagine, the trauma that our firefighters, the emotional trauma that our firefighters experienced on that day, not only from the house fire, from the physical exhaustion, and the fact that they were unsuccessful in the rescue at Perry Mills Pond, you can understand a little bit about what we're asking our firefighters to do. And certainly through this grant, we're trying to look at the firefighter as a whole person and look at all of the elements that jeopardize his or her health over the life of their careers with the department, and make sure that they have all of the training and capabilities to do it without hurting themselves or placing themselves in danger. So it's a very comprehensive application that Chief Gamola has worked on. It approaches firefighter health and safety from a number of different aspects, including assessments and training, peer training for train-the-trainer programs for our own members that will manage the process, as well as bringing in some experts from the outside to help us deal with some of these issues. And I think that in the long term, we'll see better firefighter health, better firefighter mental health, and there will be a reduction in sick injury, and as the families of our members participate, maybe unwillingly, in this process, a better diet, better lifestyle, hopefully there'll be reduced costs for our insurance exposure as well.
Representative Ambrose.
Chief McCarthy, will all firefighters be required to participate in this exercise? So
the participation will be mandatory. We have excellent cooperation and endorsement from the union. We will manage this. So the assessments will be mandatory. We'll develop programs that will focus on training that will be incorporated, that every member will participate in. Our approach is mandatory but non-punitive at this point.
Thank you.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 3. Is this equipment for each firehouse, or is it a designated area?
So we will purchase the equipment. It will be available, and where it will be located. At some points, it will be at the some equipment will be at the training grounds, and some at Station 1 or Station 2. We have talked about making this available to the police department as well. So we want to make sure that it's available and centrally located. So the diagnostic equipment, the assessment equipment is certainly transportable, so we could bring it to any station to make the maximum provide the maximum benefit for the department.
I had one more question. And Is any of this type of equipment available now for use at the Fairfield Park and Rec at the gym?
No, so the equipment that we're purchasing is not weight equipment, it's not exercise equipment, it's more assessment, and we're receiving training on how to develop programs to engage firefighters in the type of physical training, PT if you will, that will provide them the maximum benefit while still allowing them to perform their daily duties and maybe the emergency duties in the department.
Thank you.
Representative Walk.
Jay Wolk, District 5. Hi, Chief. Thank you for being here. So let me go back a step into insurance for firemen and just making sure they're covered for something like this. So when they see something like something traumatic, like seeing a boy who drowned, or the first responders who went into the school in Newtown, they are covered. So afterwards, from seeing something like that, or I would see something like that, there's counseling, and the counseling is covered under these into your insurance policy for these firemen to be taken care of, because it may not just be for one session, it may be for more.
Yep, we do have an employee, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I just want that for you guys.
Yeah, so we
I'm
do have
for
an employee assistance program. In fact, the program director is coming to meet with the command staff tomorrow morning. We've just recently changed EAP providers, and those services are available to every employee as a benefit that they receive through the department, as well as benefits that they receive through their own insurance that they're provided by the department.
Yeah, stress, I'm sure, is just, it's unbearable to see things like that, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative McCulloch.
Thank you, Representative. Remembering my name. Chief Kamola and McCarthy, the actual wording refers to health and fitness equipment, yet you referenced mental health. Could you address that a little more directly, please, on how this grant is going to affect or help members' mental health status?
So your question, as I understand it, is you'd like to know how this grant will improve or affect our firefighters' mental health, correct?
Chief Kamola, the actual wording is, whereas it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield to expend up to $110,788 to purchase firefighter health and fitness equipment and training. Yet in the dialogue, Chief McCarthy described, which we all understand, the mental stresses of your profession. So how does this grant direct money towards that?
That's a great question. The lion's share of this grant is spent on training and certifications under the contractual provisions of the grant. $7,500 of this grant is designated to provide a peer support counselor certification program. We currently have peer support counselors in the department, and they are the ones who met with our firefighters who were involved in the drowning this weekend. And it's been so successful that we want to increase our number of peer counselors. And the best way to do it from a cost-effective perspective, and also from a learning perspective, is to host a certification program. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be the host agency for a peer counselor certification program, and we're going to provide the opportunity for our firefighters who are inclined to gain this body of knowledge, and also for our strategic partners in the area to participate as well.
Thank you. I guess I must have missed your kettlebell class at one point.
No, there's no kettlebells in this purchase.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Chiefs.
Thank you.
Our next item is the Valley Road Bridge Bond Resolution, and we will hear from Mr. Hurley. Welcome, Mr. Hurley.
Good evening. Valley Bridge is first. Okay, good evening, RTM members. I'm Bill Hurley, the engineering manager for the town of Fairfield, and I'm here tonight to answer any questions regarding the Valley Road Bridge project. Let me do a quick recap of the project and the resolution request. The Valley Road Bridge is located at the Brook Lawn Parkway and Valley Road intersection over the Horse Tavern Brook. The bridge was constructed in 1930 and is rated by the Connecticut DOT as being in poor condition since the year 2000. The bridge has exposed rebar, cracks, scaling, and spalling, and the girders are in poor condition. There's extensive corrosion on the beams, which have reduced its strength, and the bridge is rated as scour critical. The final design has been completed, and the bridge is scheduled for advertising in October this year, 2017. This date is fixed because, based on the calendar funding, and that any delays in securing the appropriation or contract bid advertising will result in the loss of the federal funding, which amounts to $2.56 million. The purpose of the project is to reconstruct and replace the bridge. Due to the fact that this is a skewed bridge with two immediately adjacent intersections, limited right-of-way, adjacent parkland, and hydraulic restraints, the construction costs are estimated at a little bit higher than a typical bridge. The subsequent construction phase of the bridge would occur in April 2018 and is estimated to be $3.2 million. The town will receive federal funding at approximately 80% reimbursement of eligible costs for the construction administration, inspection, and the construction costs for the project. The bridge will have a 50 to 75-year lifespan before it is needed to be rehabilitated or replaced. Only minor maintenance is expected for the first 5 or 10 years of the bridge after construction. The project will be bonded as part of the non-reoccurring capital budget. As I mentioned before, the town will receive 80% reimbursement of the eligible costs during the construction phase. Typically, the contractor and consultant invoices are paid by the town with concurrent requests for reimbursements. And now that the state has electronic reimbursements, they're typically issued 1 to 2 months after we submit them, based on the similar bridge projects, with the exception of a final retainage, which would be reimbursable after the final audit. The Valley Road Bridge construction's been on the waterfall chart for several years, and let's see, as I mentioned before, we're really hoping to get this passed, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Representative Ambrose.
What about pedestrian access to the bridge to and from? Will there be a separate walkway on one side or the other side of the bridge to allow for pedestrian access?
Yes, there'll be pedestrian access.
Will be a raised sidewalk?
Yeah, it'll be a 6-inch curb, at least on a minimum, and sidewalk, I believe, on both sides.
On both sides? Mm-hmm. Could you just confirm that for the next meeting?
Sure, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Representative Pierce.
Bill, you said that construction would start in April 2018. What is the projected construction schedule?
Typically, the bridge projects last about 12 to 18 months. If we get really, really lucky, we could try to fit it in the one construction season, but most likely, based on, there's still some utility work, actually, that's being done now, and that will push it probably to late April, and so we'll have a majority of the project constructed, but there's that winter, what we call winter shutdown, so it really depends, but for calculating purposes, I would probably say that 12 to 18 months, and it's probably somewhere in the middle at this time.
Thanks. One other question. So I know that there was a lot of discussion about the design of this bridge in particular. Can you just give us a general description of what type of design was used and some of the materials? I know that there was, some of the neighbors had requested wood being used, and
Yeah, one of the...
in the railings, not instead of metal guardrails.
Yeah, well, again, when you go for a federal bridge, you have to meet the Federal Highway Association's guidelines, and so there are some things that are a little bit flexible on the design, and then there's some that aren't. Because of the approach, and the existing bridge has like concrete or like the stone wall, feature, leading up to the bridge, that if we do that as a design and construct it as crash resistant, we're okay on that. The one end, though, where the quote park is, I don't know if you're anybody familiar, I think there's a little swing set, or used to be a little swing there. On that side there is the one that we have to put a guide rail, but because of the relative flatness before the drop-off going into the brook, we are able to use a timber guide rail with a steel backing. So that was one of the things that, again, with the support of the neighborhood showing up at the meeting and the state and the federal people at the meeting there, we were able to get that approved. There are some aesthetic features on the bridge that are eligible, but we couldn't, go with the most grandiose design of, say, a bridge rail completely made out of wood. That they wouldn't accept. And so we met with the neighborhood twice, and when we do the actual bid, we will have one more meeting with hopefully when the contractor is determined. I will invite anybody in the neighborhood out to attend that and try to get a personal relationship with the contractor. I find that if we're able to do that as a neighborhood or as a town, we can get a little bit more out of the project. What do they say, sweeter sugar than with vinegar, or whatever that saying is. So that's our intent.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Representative White.
Bill, as I remember, from Stratfield Road as you come in onto Brooklawn Parkway, I'm not going to bite it. Anyway.
Like those MTV singers, right?
Anyway, where you come in from Stratfield Road, isn't it one way coming in and one way going out with the brook in the middle?
That's correct.
Okay, so what happens when you have to shut things down as you're working on the bridge, in terms of access?
Okay, it's a good question, and we have plans, what they call a detour plan, that has been approved by the town and the state on that. The one way that goes from Stratfield, you'll be able to drive in, and then you'd be able to take a right on Valley Road to get out of the neighborhood, so to speak. But you won't be, obviously, with the bridge under construction, it's a complete replacement. And rather than have the bridge go for, say, maybe 3 years, doing alternating traffic and probably 20 to 30% more in cost, we decided to close the bridge down completely. So that one way in and one way out on Valley Road will be the way that the people in the neighborhood would go. If you're coming from, Wilson Street, and from that area coming down Valley, you're not really affected unless you were going to cross the bridge to get to Brooklawn, and there are other ways to go. If you're going towards Stratfield Road, there's no really inconvenience, and if you were going up towards Park Avenue, well, if you're coming from the Wilson, you can always reach Park that way, so it's a minor inconvenience.
In the public meetings, did this come up, and are the people aware that that's what's going to be happening?
We have done a preliminary discussion with the general neighborhood, but the people on Valley Road, one of the, on Valley Road section, in order to avoid the people who sometimes are curious, say coming from Toilsome Hill Road to Valley Road and then have to turn around. Now the fact that it's a one-way and then you have the bridge closed, we don't have a turnaround. So on that, we'll have signs and some barricades there in the front to tell people, so they don't even get into the neighborhood there. And that was based on discussions with the neighborhood. They were willing to give up that little approach. It's only like 3 houses worth, but it will prevent so many of the trucks or people that don't belong from going in and having to turn around in their driveways and all that. And they thought that having to go around the block for them would be a much better inconvenience than having, strangers having to turn around and use their driveway or park or do whatever.
I think you've done, a great job with that kind of thing, and I know the bridge further up on Valley Road, everyone did remark about what a great job you did on that one. So I'm glad that they're aware.
Yeah, on this one here, when we had the very first meeting, the neighborhood made it clear they wanted input, and we've incorporated as many of their comments as we possibly can.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Kings Highway Pedestrian Improvements Bond Resolution presented by Mr. Hurley.
Hello again. I'll present a quick summary of the Kings Highway Improvement Project and here to answer questions. Quick recap, the Kings Highway Pedestrian Improvements Project covers Route 1 from the area of Chambers Street to Villa Avenue. The construction, we've just completed the final design phase, and construction is set for 2018. The project involves new concrete sidewalks, curbs, and medians. The curbs and sidewalks are on both sides of the street. Pedestrian improvements, ADA ramps, landscaping, and a pocket park in the area where I guess the old Brown Brothers were, just beyond the Walgreens that are there. Currently, the town has authorized spending up to $2 million for the project, and the original project covered from Kings Highway to Chambers Street to Brentwood Avenue. So we were able to get additional grant money, and the construction limits now have been extended eastward towards Villa Avenue. The latest additional funding of $1.45 million has an 80% reimbursement, which would amount to $889 in grant money, $889,000. And then we had the additional lot SIP money of $337,000, which is 100% reimbursable, and that was stated in the resolutions. The only alternative would be to reduce the scope of the project. Sidewalks that aren't covered in the project would need to be repaired and replaced by the town within a couple of years anyway, without reimbursement. So it really doesn't make sense to deny it, but if the funding is denied, the state and federal government may seek reimbursement for costs already incurred through the design portions of the project. And, of course, denying the additional funding would hurt the chances of the town maybe getting future funding under this program. This is a program that, and the project does have support from the state DOT and from the regional planning agency MetroCog, and hence that's why they were able to give us this additional grant money. Again, the entire project will be appropriated, but bonding can be performed in phases. And again, just like the other project there, state and federal reimbursement, actually, I'm sorry, state and federal reimbursements are typically deposited electronically 1 to 2 months after invoice payment, with the exception of the final retainage. So I'm here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Hurley, so can you describe at all some of the planting, or is there going to be a median anymore? Are you going to widen sidewalks? Can you talk about some of the improvements that will be done for crosswalks, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there'll be crosswalks, there'd be signalized pedestrian improvements. I can pass this around. I don't know if it was part of your packet or not. There's the pocket park concept I have here to show. We basically used a model of the one off of Reef Road, where, we wanted some vegetation but didn't want to look like a jungle. It would be out of place there. And then be some benches and a small little sidewalk there. The Sidewalks in general will be a minimum of 5 feet. One side will have a grass strip. The other side, the sidewalks could be almost 8 foot or 9 foot wide, believe it or not, because in order to meet the ADA and what they call PROAG, when you have a utility pole in the middle of the sidewalk, we still have to make sure there's enough room for a wheelchair to get by. And so some of those utility poles had over 30 wires on them, and it would have just been cost prohibitive to remove them all. By making bringing in the curbs a little bit and making the sidewalk wider, we are able to, I think we only had to move 2 or 3 utility poles, so there was a significant design on that. The median, twice, we met with the DOT hoping to maybe get rid of the median. Again, very controversial if we do that, because now people can come out of their driveways and take left-hand turns, and as you know, anytime you do a left-hand turn where you have to cross 4 lanes of traffic, it's going to lead to increase in accidents. So the state was really adamant about leaving the median in there. Unfortunately, by doing that, though, we had to put away the idea of like a bike lane or something like that. So every time there's a pro and a con, you still have to try to work with it, and that was what the state had agreed upon. We did, though, we were able to get the state, though, to approve a concrete medium with maybe form liners, and so it would be a little bit more decorative than certainly a lot more decorative than what's out there now, which is asphalt, where, by the way, when you get out of here at night, that black asphalt median, I think one time I came very close to hitting it. It's very hard when you even pull out here. So at least the concrete will be, white in color. We might be able to give it a little bit of a color texture, depending on the contractor. If they have experience with that, we can maybe do that. But those are some of the highlights of the project.
Can I just follow up briefly?
Yes.
What about plantings? I know you mentioned the pocket park, but what about plantings along the strip?
At this stage of the game, there's not that much because of the right-of-way. As it is, we had to go for approximately 12 small property easement takings. We basically held the line of the existing sidewalk, but the way the right-of-way, because Route 1 was laid out by the state highway in 1926, and the Brentwoods and all these other ones, they're almost like perpendicular. There's no radius to them. So the minute we put a radius and then you put a sidewalk with a handicap ramp, we had to do a slight encroachment. And so we have been able to have the small areas appraised, and we're in that process of signing off. We have a couple that are already signed off, and we're working on it as we speak for that aspect. So there's really no room right now, per se. What we might do is in a couple of spots where that was a really wide sidewalk, I might have the contractor form out or box out a certain area, and being honest, when the state, whatever, walks away, maybe we can go back and replant.
Why would you not plant the median?
The state, 2 things on that. By the town doing that, automatically the town, the liability and the maintenance of those medians gets transferred to the town. That was number 1. And number 2, the median, in this case, unlike further down or like on Brooklawn Avenue where it's a 6 or 7 foot median, these medians are only 3.5 or 4 feet. And so you'd be getting, like the microphone in front of you there, those type of plantings, if you could even get them. So it was, unfortunately, it was too narrow.
Representative Walk.
Jay Walk, District 5. Hi, Bill. And through the years of Bill doing projects, I have full faith in you on this project that it's going to come out great. Just a question: when we met with Bill as our Carol, our district, we talked about the intersection. I'm not quite sure the name, but it's right on the intersection where Firestone is on Kings Highway.
Brentwood and Longfellow.
Brentwood, right. So we met and we talked about this, that since we're doing improvements, Mr. Hurley came up with and we came up with the idea that it would be a good idea for that light, when it does get upgraded, that you would have a left turn signal on that light. So it would keep traffic moving, first of all. It would be safer, second of all, because I was in an accident at that intersection. And when you try to make a left turn, and cars are like trying to make a left turn going the other way, going up Brentwood, it's a bit of confusion, and then people get impatient, and they try to get out of the left lane, and they start flying up the right lane. So, I'll be quiet, but is that something we can do, right?
Well, number one is the state is in the process, and I think they are putting out their signal project also in the spring. So that signal will be improved. The only thing I have to just correct you on a little bit is I believe there'll be what they call a lead green, where it enables someone to do a left as opposed to a left turn lane.
Perfect.
Yeah, because we don't have the
that's what we
room
meant.
for the left turn lanes. I just want to make
No,
it
that's
clear.
perfect.
Sure. And I'll double check on that, but if I recall, after our meeting, I checked with the state, and I believe they incorporated that.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hurley.
All right, thank you.
Moving on. Is that it? We're not doing these? Yeah, the dog. We still have to. All right, yeah, it's just. Okay, so we're doing the noise ordinance first?
The noise ordinance, they did.
We did that.
It's
Oh,
the
no, I'm
animal
sorry, the
ordinance.
animal ordinance, that's why I don't see it. All right. All right, so the next item is number 11, the animal ordinance amendments.
Hey, everybody. So this came about after the District 4 reps received a complaint from a constituent. We reviewed the ordinance, and we made a couple of very small tweaks. We increased the amount of the fine and just made a couple of other minor changes. It's laid out in the memo that I sent to the body, unless anyone has any questions or wants further background. I think that's it.
Any questions? Representative Sundman.
Eric Sundman, District 10. I had a question about the phrase towards the end of the ordinance, unless such person shall immediately remove all feces so deposited by such animal and dispose of in a same proper manner. If they did that, would they not be subject, punishable to the fine of $100?
If they pick it up and dispose of it, they are not subject to the fine.
So what I don't understand is, I mean, if a dog is going on private property and defecating on that property, and they remove it, that's okay.
The existing ordinance is about removal. I mean, this language we lifted from the Westport ordinance.
Okay.
We don't have to add this language to the ordinance. I think that requiring people to pick up after their dog in the ordinance and making it clear that they have to do that is a good thing, and that's why we added it.
And the enforcement?
Enforcement's difficult. I mean, you've got to catch the person in the act, and then you have to be able to identify them to make a complaint. The person who owns the dog, because we don't find dogs.
Okay.
I would try taking a picture.
You can take a picture, I mean, if you know the person, but it's not easy to enforce, but that's similar to
Okay.
other ordinances.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Walk.
Just as something that we did at Dogwood Green when I was president, we put dog stations up that they can come from in the neighborhood, and who's ever walking their dog, come over to where we have a station that they can pull plastic so they can put their poop in the plastic, which seems to be working because Melville, in front of Stratfield School, going up and down Melville was a disgrace of how much dog poop was, and people parked to let their kids off there, and it was for years when I had my kids there, so it can be messy, you know, people aren't taking care of it, nobody wants to say anything either, you know, who wants to come forward and say, I saw Tom, you know, walking the dog, and, you know.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but.
Pick it up.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Breakdown of meetings?
I just want to read the final item. The moderator has referred the amendments to the tax relief for the elderly and disabled homeowners ordinance, Section 95-7 to Section 95-15.4 of Chapter 95, Article 3 of the Code of the Town of Fairfield, sponsored by the Elderly and Disabled Homeowners Tax Relief Ordinance Committee, to the Legislative and Administration Committee under the under Rule 32 of the RTM Rules to Regulate. And that is it. So we can break down into committees. And thank you.